Hello Year 8, welcome to your homework for Term 2. So in your lessons you've been looking at religious conflict in the 16th century. You've learned how Martin Luther, the German monk, sparked the Reformation by being the first person to really articulate those ideas criticising the Catholic Church, how this launched the Reformation, Protestants versus Catholics. And over the next sort of 100 years or more after Luther's 95 Theses, Europe was divided between Protestants and Catholics. Both thought they had the true version of Christianity, and often this disagreement turned violent in what we call the wars of religion. So in France, in Germany, even in England in the 17th century, as you'll be learning soon, these disagreements turned into war. And so it was a time of great religious upheaval. But in your homework, you're going to be looking at something that took place in another part of the world that was linked to this. So, of course, you've got Protestants and Catholics from Europe going out to the rest of the world and trying to spread their version of Christianity. So the people doing this are called missionaries. Missionaries, people who want to spread their religion, often to countries that are overseas. And we're going to be focusing on what was taking place over here in Japan. So here's Japan, a set of islands in the Pacific Ocean off the east coast of Asia here. So in the 1500s, explorers from Portugal, as you know from your homework last time, worked out how to sail. Actually, it was the late 1400s. They worked out how to sail around the tip of Africa and get to Asia. And you learnt about how the Portuguese began to set up their own empire, a trading empire in Asia. In the 1500s, those Portuguese sailors reached the country of Japan, and they began trading. So the Portuguese would bring items such as tin or lead or wool, and in exchange the Japanese might give them samurai swords or engraved wood or silk. And so this was a very lucrative money-making trade for the Portuguese. These amazing Japanese items could be brought back to Portugal. But it wasn't just traders, of course, who went to Japan. It was missionaries as well. The first Portuguese missionary to reach Japan was a guy called Francis Xavier, but many others followed him. And they began the work of converting the Japanese people, who traditionally had followed their own religion called Shinto, and also Buddhism. So they had a sort of a blend of these two religions already. But the Portuguese wanted to introduce them to Catholic Christianity. And this kind of continued the Catholic influence. More and more people were starting to convert to the new religion in Japan until the year 1635. And in that year, the ruler of Japan, who was the shogun, which means like the military leader, he wasn't the emperor of Japan, but he was basically the military leader of Japan, the shogun. His name was Tokugawa Iemitsu. And in 1635, he thought there'd been enough influence from these foreign Christians. He didn't want this to continue anymore. He was concerned that the traditional ways in Japan might be lost, and this might perhaps erode his power. It might make him less powerful if people were starting to follow the rules of a religion with its headquarters all the way over here in Rome. So he decided he was going to ban not just Christian missionaries, but all foreigners from his country. And this is what we call the Sakoku Edict. An edict is a law, and Sakoku is a Japanese word which literally means closed country. And the rules of this edict, this law, were quite simple. Nobody was allowed into the country. Nobody was allowed to leave the country. If anybody did leave the country, any Japanese person left the country and came back, they would be killed straight away. They weren't allowed to build any ships with big enough masts to go and sail overseas. The country was totally closed. And there were some sort of European trading goods that people still wanted in the country. And the Portuguese were no longer allowed to come, but there was a tiny island off the coast near Nagasaki in Japan where Dutch traders from the Netherlands were allowed to sail their ships to and trade some things with the Japanese, but they weren't allowed onto the main island of Kyushu, which is where Nagasaki is. They weren't allowed into any of the rest of the country at all. So, and this situation continued for 200 years. Japan was a closed country. No foreigners were allowed in, and no Japanese people were allowed out. And this situation lasted until the 1850s, but that's another story. So, what is your homework for this term? All of the information I've just given you is also written underneath this video. And the work I want you to produce is a poster about the Sakoku Edict of 1635. I want information on this poster about the trade that existed with Portugal and Japan. I want information about the work of the Portuguese missionaries in Japan. I want you to think about the causes of the Sakoku Edict. I want you to think about what that term actually means. That could be on your poster as well. What were the actual rules of the Sakoku Edict, and what were the consequences for the people of Japan? What did that mean for that country over the next 200 years? All the information you need to make this is here in the text underneath and in what I've just told you. You shouldn't need to do any more research, but of course if you want to, please feel free. Make your work look good. It'd be great to make a display out of some of these. And enjoy.